Actually, it's a little bit after, and we may lose a member here at 1 o'clock. I mean, it's a little bit afternoon. We may lose a member at 1, but since it's a conference committee and we know that the Senate will be 20 to 30 minutes late, and we may not lose them quite at 1. Right? Okay. Over the last couple of days, we've looked at the issue of contract nursing. We've looked at kind of the history of how we got where we are, and looked at the increases in state liability for this. Yesterday, we talked about liability issues, and we talked about. I'm sorry, lost my train of thought. Yesterday, we talked about a couple issues relating to this. Today, we're going to talk about the workforce issues and the pipeline. We're going to hear from some of our educational institutions and others as we go forward. And we're going to then tomorrow we'll form some sort of report with some recommendations that we'll send back to the Appropriations Committee. So without further ado, we'll call someone we're all very familiar with over the last couple of days, Scott Bruner.
Not the worst introduction I've had in a while. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott Bruner. I'm the Deputy Secretary for KDADS for Hospitals and Facilities. I'm not going to take very much of your time today. I think others can talk about the training pipeline. I did want to point out in the materials that we shared on Monday, in addition to information about the wages that we pay our nursing and direct care staff, what we're paying for our contractors, we did include some information about what the state employee benefit package looks like, because you had asked about that, and we didn't really get to that point yesterday. But just again, as a reference point of what state health insurance, state retirement, those things look like for our employees. I would just point out a couple of other things that are in that PowerPoint related to our efforts to recruit and retain our staff to make it so we don't have to have as many agency workers. There's a slide from each hospital of efforts they've made to recruit and retain, and their efforts along those lines. You can look at that at your pleasure. The one thing I did want to comment on, or just point out as a specific example, on slide number 23, both Larned and Osawatomie work with nursing schools, community colleges, universities to provide training locations, practicum locations for nursing students, social work students, psychology students. We work with the medical schools also to provide training sites for students that are in residency. So we do all of those things as best we can, and have really put effort into building those relationships, because it's about exposing students to our environment so they can see what it's like to work at a state hospital and not have to rely on rumor, innuendo, history, whatever else they might have. So, and Osawatomie provided some great examples from this year. At Fort Scott Community College, they had 11 students that did a practicum experience. That was more than just one day. They were there for a couple of weeks at a time. Neosho Community College had 28 students. Rasmussen College had 30. And we're going to have 37 students on campus on April 5th. So just as some examples of the efforts to do that, we're not sitting back and waiting for people to find us. And then the last comment I'd make on the last slide, number 24, related to our efforts to build a new state psychiatric hospital in Wichita. The governor appointed an advisory panel to help us with that process, to make recommendations. One of the areas that the group is tasked to work on and provide recommendations about workforce pipeline, because not only do we have to staff the hospitals we have, we're going to add a demand for 150 to 200 state staff or staff people to operate this new hospital. That's in addition to the needs that are already in the Sedgwick County and South Central Kansas area. So we know we need to think about pipeline and how to build the capacity. At one of our recent panel meetings in February, we had some presenters from Wichita State, from the University of Kansas Medical School, and the Board of Nursing. You heard from some of them today. I'm happy to share what they presented with us, if that would be helpful. And then to kind of dig a little deeper into that and to draw more voices in, the panel authorized a subgroup, or we're calling them subpanels, subcommittee, to spend some more time studying those issues. And they're going to meet over the next couple of weeks between on the 12th and I think the 25th of April, again, to help kind of flesh out some other recommendations. So we'll have more material along those lines. relatively specific to our needs at the state hospital and the new state hospital, but I think it benefits everybody in terms of we're going to talk about producing more nurses, more therapists, more social workers, and more people in the direct care world as well for our needs. So we can be happy to bring more information about that back to Bethel or Oversight or when you meet again next January when you come back. That's all the comments that I really had for today, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'm happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time, and I'll be here through your meeting if other things come up.
I think now is that appropriate time. Committee, do you have questions for Representative Helgerson?
Scott, I appreciate all your work. Someone brought up to me that Nebraska has a specific program in recruiting, training for the individuals that we're needing at Larned in particular. Are you familiar with what they do?
They have thank you for that question. The Nebraska legislature authorized, I don't know how much money it is, we can certainly find that out, but an appropriation to the University of Nebraska to create a behavioral health workforce center. That's, I believe, based at the medical school in Omaha, but serves the whole state. But their specific focus is studying the needs, identifying pathways to recruit more workers in the behavioral health space. And they've actually been to Kansas our team's talked to them a couple of times. They presented at a workshop hosted by the Sunflower Foundation last fall. Time runs together. It was warm, so it's probably August, September, something like that. But anyway, they have a number of initiatives that we've tried to pattern and talk to them about what they're doing. But their legislature specifically authorized this group with an appropriation to go out and recruit and find best practices along those lines. But it's a behavioral health workforce center. Sure, we can pull some of that together for you. Sure.
Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, Scott, you're familiar with the, what is it, Behavioral Health Center for Excellence that's been talked about?
Yes.
Because it's my understanding that that program that we're trying to get started here somewhat mirrors, not in the exact form, but kind of mirrors what Nebraska has done.
I believe it's similar in focus and purpose. And I believe there's a request in the budget process for funding for that, dedicated funding for that purpose. It's not universal. Others can probably speak more directly to it, but in terms of having a dedicated center to focus on behavioral health workforce, that's accurate.
Right. So, and that actually in our budget process has now gotten put off to omnibus. So I think it's kind of timely on how it's occurred to give us the opportunity, Mr. Chairman, when we start making recommendations tomorrow, is to take a good look at that. So thank you, Scott.
You're quite correct. In one of our later conferees, we'll be talking about that Center for Excellence. So, Scott, you're the experts in this field, just relating to the state hospitals. What do you look at in your crystal ball? And you've watched this go from $6 million a year to $60 million. What do you see in the out years? Do you think this stabilizes? Do you think it declines? Do you think it exacerbates? What are your people saying?
So in terms of the need for agency staffing, I don't think we'll ever get to zero. I don't see that as a probable future. We're always going to need some supplementary staffing that, kind of like the discussion yesterday, there are holidays that are hard to fill, and it does provide a workforce pipeline that's different than, somebody who wants to work for 3 months and take 3 months off. I mean, the agency staffing does allow those things. So I don't think we'll ever get to zero. As I'm realistic enough to realize we're not going to be able to sustain the level of funding the amount of money we're spending on it now. And I'd much rather spend that money on our staff, either in wages or overtime, or both. So I think what I do feel like we've come out of the pandemic restrictions and some of the obstacles that created about where we couldn't have students on campus. We couldn't open the campus up for others to come and look and see what we do or talk about it. So I think it will get better. The 24/7 pay plan, locking that in as a permanent part of the wage structure, even though we've been advertising the total compensation package as we recruit. I think it being temporary is always a little bit of a concern. So once we can publish that higher wage rate, that'll help as well. But in terms of the budget, I'm an old budget person from way back. I think about those budget timelines. This fiscal year, we appreciate the legislature's support of our needs this year to close out. I think we're going to have not as much, but a pretty large request for next year just to unwind. And maybe by 2026, we can be in what a more normal range would be. But that's my goal. I know it's not sustainable. I'm not going to keep coming with my hand out for that purpose. So that's my goal, to figure out what we need to do to make that ask more reasonable as we go into the budget cycle for next year in fiscal 2026.
Other questions, committee? Seeing none. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for bearing with us these last 3 days.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
Next up, Blake Flanders, President and CEO of Kansas Board of Regents. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Mason, and members of the committee. You have my written testimony, and I won't go through and read those 15 pages. But what I might do is just go through a couple of slides that I think highlight some of this work that the colleges and the board has been doing. We've really looked at nursing program capacity, our NCLEX pass rates. What can we do for Western Kansas? How does that look? Because we've had some numbers there that are constricted. And then our student financial aid, how might that work better? And we have that in the testimony. And do we have the articulation agreements we need? Generally, those have been, I think, not a barrier through the system. Not especially here in the nursing area. And then we've got some bright spots, and those folks are here. We've got a Kansas Nursing Workforce Center at the University of Kansas that I think is going to be of assistance. We've also got a healthcare advisory committee. But I wanted to just talk a little bit about some of the headwinds that we have in higher education, but they're specific to the nursing program. So this nursing shortage, when we talk about mitigating it, the nursing initiative was passed by the legislature in 2006 to expand the capacity of these programs, and it did that. It was a shortage then. You'd want to talk to the Department of Commerce or Department of Labor, but I believe that the nursing, registered nursing profession has been on the top 5 jobs list in terms of vacancies. There used to be a job vacancy report. It's there every time. And so I'm going to walk through some things and then maybe make some suggestions for smaller groups or perhaps a group to get together and think about how might we kind of reimagine the production here. Because if we just nibble around the edges, I just believe that we're really not going to make a dent into this shortage. Nursing can be I think it's clearly, as I've spoke with nurses, it's one of the most rewarding careers out there, but it can be a very demanding career, and it does require academic proficiency. So we've had an issue with student demand. Before, nursing programs had large waiting lists. They essentially just selected who was going to get in based on prerequisites taken. That's no longer the case. In all cases, college readiness is an issue. We just have a general public perception of the value of a college degree. I can tell you in Kansas, that value is strong. And obviously, you've all talked about the effect that the COVID pandemic had on nursing as a career. We've seen enrollment in our system decline, and people will tell you that, well, it was declining because of COVID. Well, COVID was an accelerator. We have an enrollment cliff right on the horizon. Enrollment's been dropping for a while, and the real workhorse for producing nurses has been our community college sector. And as you can see, they've been impacted by enrollment decline really in a disproportionate way, and have had significant drops. And I can show you that it's also impacted our enrollments in our nursing programs. Those have also declined over time. Now, we see those coming up just a little bit in our community college sector. I'm hopeful that those will rise back to previous levels, but keep in mind, even at previous levels, we still had shortages in this profession. Might not be as acute as it is today, but there were still shortages. And here's an issue that impacts our community colleges and our universities, is that in nursing, there is a level of math required, obviously reading comprehension as well. And we've seen, this is just ACT's numbers, we've seen these benchmarks start to drop. So what that does is it constricts the number of students that can be successful in those programs. So in the last 10 or so years, we've seen those, and these are high school graduates who are at college level. And this is by ACT centers. So we got everybody, a number of students taking ACT. We've dropped, we used to have 51% that were ready in math of the high school graduates. Now this isn't the people that dropped out. These are the high school graduates who took the ACT. 28% now. In science, it's about 30%. So these are important in nursing curriculum. English, we've seen a drop. Reading, we're at 40%. If you have trouble reading, it's real hard to execute on the job, particularly in this occupation. And those that met all four, we were at 30%. We were above the national average. We're now down at 19%. So that pipeline for our programs at the two-year college level, whether it be a technical college or community college, or I would dare say at the university as well, that pool has shrank. And our demographics are changing. We have more first-generation students that we need to attract. We've got a larger number of Pell-eligible students, diverse student populations, and we need to up our recruitment in the rural areas of the state as well. I believe we also have to recruit more out-of-state students to Kansas. We have slow population growth. We need more students in these programs and then have service scholarships where they live and work in Kansas once they're finished with the programs. And our colleges are doing a good job in terms of recruiting, but the pools, as you can see, have gotten smaller. I might just, this is a little small to see, but what this is our state university, just our pass rates. Now, these are people that went through a baccalaureate program and became an RN. As you know, you can also be in through an associate degree and have an RN. And those average pass rates in 2022, first time pass rate of about 86.3%. As you look at our public, community, and technical colleges, an average pass rate about 79.4%. So very good. And if you look at those top community college and technical colleges, they're doing a very good job. Those programs are probably in areas that are well resourced. My concern is the lower 9 of our community colleges, some of them rural, have a 70% pass rate. So let me tell you what that kind of means. If you have a attrition rate in your program of about 10 to 13%, you start with 100 students, you know you're going to have about 87 graduate. Now, if your pass rate's only 55 to 60%, we had an awful lot of effort for not many students coming out of the pipeline. And then our practical nurse pass rate is much higher, and probably and it's a more entry credential when you compare that to the registered nurse. So I believe we we probably need to rethink about our collaboration among the institutions. How could we go to more of a hub and spoke model? Could the University of Kansas, could a regional university, could a Johnson County Community College have a better way to connect with other nursing programs? Should every program, as an example, should every program have a nursing director? Do they all need independent nursing directors? Or can we begin to share those kind of things? Does every clinical nurse that teaches in clinical, should they all have a master's degree? Or can a baccalaureate level nurse do that, where we would have greater access to a larger number? These are kind of things that would have to be worked out with the Board of Nursing. This is obviously a longer conversation, but I think I'll be up in front of you next year and the year after trying to solve this nursing shortage. If we don't really do something, I think radically different within our programs and in the program delivery, and I believe the community and technical colleges and universities can speak to that as well. Again, we need to increase our capacity. We do have an initiative at Fort Hays State University to increase the capacity of their program, and so we see that as being very positive. That's going through the legislative cycle now, and our group that met had several of these recommendations that are needed. Obviously, public awareness and showing some of the good things that are within the nursing career or something that's necessary, as opposed to hearing the negative kinds of things. We also have more data if you ever want it on our website, or you can just call me. That's the easy button, and I'll get you any of those data. So I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you. Committee, in the interest of time, I think we'll go ahead and hold questions till the end. So just jot down your questions for this specific.
You have a copy.
That's what I'm saying. I didn't see the same charts that I saw up there in my packet.
If you don't have them in your packet, we'll get them to you.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, committee, just jot down your questions for the rest, and we'll work through these, and then we'll have questions at the end. Thank you, Mr. Flanders. Next up, Heather Morgan with Community Colleges. Welcome.
Hello. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to try to run through some things that community colleges are doing and then finish with some recommendations. The first thing I wanted to say is that the community and technical colleges are working and collaborating together, as well as we're collaborating with our universities and across systems. We have community colleges who are running nursing programs for other community colleges to be more efficient and to be able to share staff. So I don't want to leave this committee with the idea that nobody's doing anything to try to solve some of this crisis. And the community colleges are provide over 70% of the technical education in the state. We're providing the 2-year sector is providing about 80% of the RN workforce. We're certainly starting with the certified nurse aide, certified med aide, LPN, and RN. While this is focused on contract nursing and how to solve some of Scott's financial issues at the state hospital, this is really an issue across all of healthcare and all of the state budget items that you all determine. You can see on my testimony that we're turning out about 12,000 students a year with some sort of healthcare credential. We have, as you've heard in previous days, we have many tuition options for students and scholarships. If a student wants to get a career in healthcare, they can find a scholarship, or they can find an employer who will do a tuition reimbursement. So that's not really where we're seeing the most issues. There's also programs within DCF to help people who are on TANF get into CNA programs, the AOK program, people who don't have high school diplomas to get that GED and get into the healthcare workforce. So we have some things that are working. The Kansas Promise Scholarship covers 100% of the cost of tuition fees, books, and supplies for any person studying in healthcare at the community or technical colleges. We have RN to BSN partnerships, so you can take the classes at our community colleges and come out with a bachelor's degree from KU in nursing in 2 years. So we've got a lot of partnerships in place. We're also working on registered apprenticeships and directly working with the Kansas nursing community, long-term care community, to figure out work and learn models. 80% of community college students are part-time, so these students who are training in healthcare are also working at the same time. Some of the areas for exploration that we would recommend are really strengthening the pipeline. Dr. Flanders talked about the preparedness, or perhaps lack thereof, of K-12 students who are coming to us in math. We are seeing the number one course that's having problems is pharmacological calculations. You take 3 years of math in high school and you take them your freshman, sophomore, and junior year, and then you try to come to nursing school, you've forgotten how to do a lot of that math. We are having to remediate significant numbers of our K-12 students who are coming to us going into healthcare because of lack of math skills and being able to do the pharmacological calculations that are required to get your RN degree. We also have excess capacity in some places or across the state and not enough capacity in other places. At Johnson County Community College, I talked to their program director yesterday. They had 360 applicants for 80 nursing seats last year. They said that they could add 20 more students easily if they could find more faculty and had more clinical sites. So you have to have the faculty to teach in the classroom, but you also have to have the clinical site for them to practice and the proper supervision there. So it's sort of a double-edged sword. However, in other areas of the state, we have nursing slots that are going unfilled. Generally, our nursing programs are seeing the quality of students that we're seeing academically has significantly declined, and the remediation has increased. So I'm going to turn and focus on the pipeline. One of the things that you'll hear from Kyle Kessler later is about this Behavioral Health Center of Excellence. We've been working, community and technical colleges have been working with the Behavioral Health Coalition and the mental health centers, thinking about how do we start. We have CNAs, we have CMAs. What's the next level for that behavioral health or even a dementia specialty? You can do a CNA or CMA through Senate Bill 155 at no cost to high school students. The tuition is covered. But what about that next step? How do we keep them in the pipeline? How do we make sure those CNAs actually go into the healthcare workforce? A CNA is a prerequisite for most nursing programs. How do we make sure our LPNs keep going into nursing? But the bottom line is we've got to have more students interested in entering healthcare earlier. And then once we have our hooks in them, we've got to keep them in the field. We have to grow our own, keep our own in Kansas, and we also need to import more people from out of state. That leads me to my areas for exploration. The community colleges have the Promise Act. However, that is only for Kansas students. The number of our colleges that are along a border in this state, Southeast Kansas, even Johnson County, KCK, if we could offer a Promise scholarship to somebody from out of state who would live and work in Kansas for 2 years after graduation and work in these fields, that would be money well spent. There was a bill in the House that got stalled in committee this year, but that's something else that we would recommend to look at for 2-year colleges, certificates, and degrees. Also looking at this mental health certificate, maybe creating an industry recognized credential at KDADS that would allow some additional courses to be Senate Bill 155 funded so that once they get their CNA, we get them interested in that mental health specialty or a dementia specialty. And then all of those courses can transfer up into the LPN RN pipeline. And then also increasing the pay for our nursing educators. At the Kansas Community and Technical Colleges, our average with benefits cost for a nursing ADN faculty member is $72,000. That is not very much when that is including benefits. If you're competing with the private sector, our instructors must have a master's degree to teach in the classroom, and it needs to be 1 degree above the level that they're supervising clinically. That is not a sustainable model in terms of us paying so low when we're competing with industry, not to mention contract nursing. The last thing that I will just say is that we, the community technical colleges, the mental health centers, the Behavioral Health Center of Excellence, we work together well. We'll continue to work together, and any help that you can give us in terms of financial resources to put some gas on this fire, get the pipeline open, we would be forever grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. We may be calling on you later. Next, Jim Janat, Kansas Association for Career and Technical Education. Welcome, sir.
I walk funny because after I lose a few more pounds, I got to get new knees, so I need a good nurse, right? So I represent the 7 tech colleges, and we do work well with community colleges and with KBOR. Despite what some people may think, we do get along pretty well. You have my testimony. I just want to hit a few high spots. The tech colleges are the one part of higher education in the state that has grown. We've grown by 70% in enrollment the last decade. Someone asked me the other day, why are your institutions growing and not the community colleges and universities? And you have to realize I've been in this business 40 some years. I've worked for universities and community colleges. The last 9 at Manhattan Tech, having the most fun of my life. The kids have this figured out. Tech college or a tech program, they don't have all the frills that distracts them. They come in, they get the skill, they get a job, they're making money. Our students make money quickly. They come out with low to no student debt. The cool thing, if you look at KBOR's data from the tech colleges, our graduates, between 75 to 80% of our graduates stay in the state. At Manhattan Tech, it's over 85%. So we're feeding our communities right back in the essential occupations, but more than that, we're feeding consumers, people buying houses, cars, clothes, groceries. So we're feeding the sales tax and the property tax back into the communities. Dr. Flanders and Ms. Morgan have mentioned a lot of the issues. And like Heather mentioned, we're trying to look at what are some ways to address the issues of the pipeline. So you'll see in the testimony a few ideas that we've kicked around. The main thing is compensation to get instructors that we need. At the CNA level, the restrictions for the qualifications for an instructor are pretty tight. That program is controlled through KDADs. For us to be able to put more people into CNA, which is a good starting place to get people into healthcare, we need support to be able to hire another teacher or two in almost every college, which would give us the ability to run another 8 to 12 sections of CNA. May not sound like much, but again, that CNA feeds the pipeline. It's a less cost investment for people to find out, do I like healthcare before they make the big jump? And the CNA occupation is critical in so many rural areas, helping in both on the aging side, but also on the youth side. As Heather mentioned, for our colleges that have an RN program, we have to have a faculty member who has a master's in nursing to teach at that level. And the pay gap grows between what we can afford to pay versus what they can make in the private sector. Applications for nursing have come back up over the last 2 years after COVID in almost all of our colleges. But if I don't have the right cadre of qualified faculty, I can't take all the students in. That's affecting the pipeline. In Manhattan, we've had the discussion through our Chamber of Commerce with the area healthcare agencies, and they're working on a business plan on where those hospitals and care centers would provide some funding back to the tech college over a 5-year period so that we could try to get the qualified people we need and put more people through the pipeline and see if that's successful. The other one that Heather and I've had a chance to talk with some of our colleagues about is the fact that the simulation labs that every healthcare program has are often being underutilized or not used to an optimum level. If I remember right, State Board of Nursing will let us do up to 50% of the clinical experience through a sim lab. We did it all through sim labs during COVID when we couldn't get into the hospitals. But our ability, again, to partner together to go after someone who could run the curriculum for the sim labs for 3 or 4 of the colleges, raise that consistency of what we're going to get for outcomes, would probably be a very worthy investment of dollars. It would reduce the strain we have on getting clinical sites, because these days you never know what that census is going to be. And especially in rural parts of the state, optimizing that use of the sim labs is going to get you more students through the pipeline. So compensation, how do we optimize the use of technology? How do we keep reaching out through CNA to get people into the pipeline? Then in particular areas of the state, I'm talking more about my area right now, right next to Fort Riley, how do we capture more and more of those exiting soldiers and families and get them into healthcare as well as other occupations? We run adult ed for the surrounding area. We've had 150 people earn their GED equivalency the last several years, but they're also getting into tech programs with us. We're also a resettlement community. We have over 100 people in ESL classes on our campus right now. Many of them from the countries they left, they were professionals. How do we work with them to get them into some of these professions? So there's different ways to attack the overall number, but frankly, the compensation on the end of getting the qualified instructors is what's going to hold us up from not hitting capacity. And I'd be glad to answer questions when it's time.
Thank you very much. Stay close. We may need you. Next up, Carol Moreland, Executive Administrator, Kansas State Board of Nursing. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you. Carol Moreland, Executive Administrator for the Board of Nursing. Thank you for the opportunity to let me come today and just share some things with you. I'm glad I followed some of these earlier presenters because I think I can clarify a little bit. I was asked to provide information about the licensure requirements for nurses in the state of Kansas, and then also actions that the Board of Nursing has done to help the nursing shortage. So that's what you have in my testimony. And I think for time purposes, I'm probably not going to spend too much time on the licensure requirements because they're listed right there. I think the big thing to remember for RNs and LPNs is we are part of the Nurse Licensure Compact. So what that means is someone applying for licensure as an RN or an LPN in Kansas has two options. They can get a single state license, which means they can practice in Kansas only, or they can get a multi-state license. And right now there's 41 states that are part of the Nurse Licensure Compact. And there's probably, I would think, 4 or 5 that have legislation in progress now. Whether it passes or not, I'm not really sure. But we're hopeful we'll get the whole country, the whole United States in it here in a few years. And that is probably the fastest way to get, or I should say, to hire an RN or an LPN in Kansas if they have a multi-state license. If they have a multi-state license, they do not do anything with us. Absolutely. We have a national nursing database in which all of that is in there. The employers can go into that national nursing database and they can check and see if that nurse that maybe is coming from Arkansas with a multi-state license truly does have an active multi-state license from Arkansas. So again, we don't stop them at all. So that's good. I also put in there about APRNs. There is not an APR, well, there is an APRN compact, but we are not part of it yet. So that's just a single state. And then I also included in there renewal of licenses. Every nursing license and an LMHT license has to be renewed every 2 years. And then I also put in there reinstatement. And what that is, if some nurse has let her license lapse, maybe 2 years, and decides that she wants to come back into nursing, so she wants to make her license active, she would do a reinstatement. So that's listed there. I wanted to just spend a little bit of time talking about the efforts that KSBN has done. We're very, very aware there was a nursing shortage before COVID. I mean, anybody could see that coming several years ago because of the age of the nursing workforce that we have. So that wasn't really a surprise to us. Some things that we've done is the board will usually approve an increase in nursing students for a nursing program as long as they have the resources to handle it. And that would be faculty and clinical sites. But our board has never turned away when a nursing program has brought that request because they're usually pretty good that they have it covered as far as faculty and clinical sites. Just to let you know, since the academic year 2018, our board has approved 18 requests to increase the student numbers in the Kansas nursing programs. And that would be for a total of 867 additional students. That includes just like 9 new nursing programs, 2 practical and 7 RN programs, and then adding more students from 9 existing nursing programs. And actually several of our nursing programs have done a great job of making a satellite program in an area in which doesn't have nursing. And so that's been extremely helpful. The thing to remember about those numbers, though, 500 of those graduates will be graduating this year or next year because they were approved 2022 or after, and they're an RN program, so they're 2-year. So hopefully that's going to help us. It was mentioned about simulation, and that was one thing that the Board of Nursing, we revised our regulation to talk about clinical, and they can have simulation up to 50% of their clinical time. And that was based on a national simulation study. So there's a lot of evidence behind that. And then we also added the use of preceptors in a practical nursing program. And that is aiding the programs because oftentimes they didn't have enough faculty in the clinical sites. But now that they can use preceptors, that's going to be able to help them. We also revised the IV therapy regulations. Before we revised them, an LPN has expanded practice in the state of Kansas if they have IV therapy certification education. Prior to us redoing this, they could not get that until after they graduated. They had to be an LPN to get that. We changed those regulations and it's now taught in most of the practical nursing curriculum. The impact that has is those LPNs are ready to go once they get licensed. You know, it's not delayed as far as them getting their IV therapy. And that came at the request of the employers. They really wanted to have it early. Our board has supported the apprenticeship model, and you've heard a little bit of that. It's been introduced to our board, and I think maybe a speaker after me is going to talk a little bit more. There's a lot of positive to doing a nurse apprenticeship program. The biggest thing that you're going to have there is they can be paid doing clinical. Part of their clinical will be paid time. And a lot of the nursing students, you know, money is a big issue for them. You know, they may be single, something along. And prior to this apprenticeship, they could not be paid, you know, while they were in school and stuff. So that has a lot of promise in the future, and I hope a lot more work. The good thing is there's nothing that has to be done at the Board of Nursing level. We don't have to change regulations or anything like that for that to happen. We've also encouraged the KU Nursing Workforce Center to connect with our National Council of State Boards of Nursing to get our licensure data. We report that to National Council of State Boards of Nursing. That's part of being part of the compact. So that's the easiest way for them to get that data is from National Council. We actually publish data about just Kansas every year in our annual report that we do, and that's available on our website. We just look at the data, the licensure data in Kansas, you know, how many nurses are in different counties and stuff like that. But we do that on a yearly basis. We do a lot of education about multi-state licensure. I will just tell you, I think that's going to be the future, and that's what's going to save everybody, is to have multi-state license. There's a lot of employers who still do not really understand the concept, so we do a lot. And then the licensed mental health technician. You know, that is a discipline that has a lot of promise to help in the workforce. However, the problems that we have are we only have 2 schools in Kansas, and I believe you heard I listened to this Monday and Tuesday, and you heard someplace that Osawatomie has one of the programs, but they're unable to do it because they don't have the staffing to get off to teach it. So just to kind of let you know, since 2015, we've had 35 graduates from LMHT programs. Okay, the last time that they renewed their license, we decreased by 20. So we only have 37 licensed LMHTs in the state. And we saw that as a real problem. We do have one other program that's not in a state hospital that has started, but they're still in their infancy. Part of what we were hearing from the LMHTs, some of the reasons that they're leaving, not just retirement, but salary, of course, has something to do with it. But for them to go on and progress to maybe an LPN, they didn't get any college credit at all for any of that education that they had leading to their licensure. And so we've done a lot of work. We have a task force. We have some nursing programs that are very interested in taking on LMHT education. And then they would get college credit for all of that. I think that's going to be a better pipeline to get into maybe an LPN, RN. And so we are working with those interested colleges right now. There will have to be some work done on the curriculum to kind of convert it over into credit hours and different stuff like that. So there will be some regulation changes that will have to be done at our point, but we're working on that. Another very positive thing that's happened is the full practice authority for APRNs. Our APRN licensure has went up because of that, because we were actually losing people to other states when we did not have that. We have approved curriculum changes for nursing programs to go hybrid, which does appeal to some students. The whole program is not hybrid, but some of it is hybrid, so that's good. And then our board is very, very committed to understanding how the whole picture is at the national level. Since we're part of the Nurse Licensure Compact, we have to look outside of Kansas. We have to look at what's it look like in the nation, because that's where you can bring some of these nurses in and stuff. So we do partner at a national level to do the nursing workforce, and there's been 3 publications there, and I listed those. I actually have a copy for each of the committee members of the 2022 National Nursing Workforce Survey. If you would like to have that, that has a lot of data in it about nursing at a national level, and it's very interesting. So if you want that, just let me know. I have it with me today. And then they do that every 2 years. So there'll be another one that they'll be doing in 2024. And then what they do all in the years in between are what they call environmental scans. That looks at what's new in nursing, what's affecting nursing now that maybe is affecting it a little bit more than it was last year and stuff like that. We're also involved at the national level so that we can say, talk to the other boards of nursing and understand what's working for them that maybe we could try in Kansas or something. I know Blake talked about the NCLEX pass rates. I actually have more new data than he does. I have the 2023 data, and it was just looked at our board last week, so that's why it's not on our website. So that's probably why he doesn't have it. But in calendar year 2023, the average passing rate for RNs was 92.53. The national average was 88.56. And then for PNs, the average in Kansas was 97.19 with the national 86.67. So you can see we are above the national. And one thing that contributed to our pass rates being better than what Blake was discussing is our licensure exam was updated. And that was done at a national level, but it included a lot more critical thinking, clinical reasoning. And so because of that, our nursing programs have changed their curriculum a little bit. And obviously it's good because those pass rates are up. Another thing that I included in your packet is the trend of the number of licenses, because I know there's always interest. How many nurses do we have licensed in Kansas? So you've got it there from fiscal year 2010 all the way up to fiscal year 2023. And it might be a little startling to you. However, some of this was expected. When we joined the Nurse Licensure Compact, we knew that we would lose licensees, a fair number of licensees actually, who lived in other states that were getting licenses here to practice in Kansas. But once we joined the NLC, they would not have to. So that's why you see that big drop that 1 year. Plus, because of the pandemic, there was the executive order for probably almost a year and a half or something that license expiration dates were extended. So we didn't have, some of our nurses did not renew their licenses at their normal time because of that. But I'm happy to report, if you look at fiscal year 2023 and the numbers there, and then the current licensure numbers, you will see that for the fiscal year so far, we are up about 800. Now that may not seem like much, but at least that's a step going up. And we still have a quarter to go. We will have all of the May graduates. We'll probably have some of those that will be licensed by the end of June. So that's our biggest license time, is the May graduates. I just had a few recommendations that I didn't put these on there because I wasn't aware that we were supposed to do that. But anyway, it's very, very important that somehow we promote nursing within the state. Okay, and we start like in middle school. So it's our suggestion that there be some state funds to be able to do a very professional media campaign for nursing that we can get into the schools. We can get it on our website. We can get so that they're going to, if they see that, they may see nursing in a little bit different image. If you talk to students about nursing and during the COVID, I think you can probably imagine what they envision. Okay, it's not real positive, unfortunately. But that's not all that nursing is. Nursing can be very, very rewarding. But you could bring a lot of different stakeholders into this and have a very nice product when you're done. I've talked to a lot of nurses, and I think you need to focus and improve what I would call the 3 S's. Salary, okay, you've heard about that, so I don't have to say much about that. Staffing ratio, they're carrying a lot heavier patient assignments than they used to. And sometimes that can be extremely overwhelming to the nurses. And then safety, okay? They do not want to work in a workplace where they are apt to get hit and stuff like that for something in which they have no control over. Absolutely. Some of them are so happy now that their employers now have metal detectors. They feel much safer because of that. Increase the faculty in the nursing programs. I just want to add one comment. 2 of the presenters ahead of me talked about the fact that the education requirement that we have for faculty is master's if they're teaching in an RN program. And that is very, very true. However, there's a caveat there. They can come in and teach without that degree as long as they either have a higher exception with us or a degree plan. If they're working on going on and getting their master's, they can work as a faculty. And if there's nobody else that they can hire, they can do a higher exception with us. So it's not that they can't teach. There's some things that can be done about that. So I just wanted to, but I've talked to some faculty and they're like, I would like to go on and be a faculty, but I have to go to school to increase my education. I don't have the money for that. Can there be some incentives or something so that if somebody wants to be a faculty, that would, help? And I just think continuing to support the work that the Board of Nursing is doing on the LMHT and trying to get more LMHT programs in Kansas, because it will mean some changes as far as regulations and stuff like that. But I think it'll be a huge improvement. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, Kyle Kessler, Executive Director of Association of Community Mental Health Centers. Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Kyle Kessler, Executive Director at the Association of Community Mental Health Centers. With the previous speakers, I have so many different segues. It's totally wrecked my ADHD issues. But I mean, I think trying to get into very quickly my comments, and I'll be brief with them, but specifically relating to what our needs are as the Community Mental Health Center safety net for the state. We're using more nurses now than we ever have before. It is very much, as you've mentioned, a seller's market, so to speak, in terms of what nurses cost. And our best solution to this problem is for us to grow our own. There's just no doubt in our minds. And so if we get right to the end of what our recommendations are, and in our testimony, I think we have it listed under phase 2 and beyond. Our request specifically for you all, and hope that you could recommend to the full appropriations committee, would be funding in the amount of $2.4 million for increases in salaries for nursing faculty at the community colleges and technical colleges. That's our fastest way to get our pipeline growing again. And then $2,500 for recruiting or retention bonuses, for a total of about $9,500 per, which with that number ends up being about 256 total faculty across the system, and keeping those classes full, but you don't have the classes if you don't have the faculty. And that's been one of the initiatives relating to our Kansas Behavioral Health Center of Excellence. And that's an initiative we undertook through our association about 7 or 8 months ago. We worked on it extremely hard. We have about 10 different partners around the table, including half a dozen higher education organizations, and probably, well, 5 or 6 different provider types as well. So this is something that we believe strongly in terms of our ability to work and get our behavioral health workforce going again. So with that, I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Very well. Thank you, Kyle. Next up, Jason Caffrey with Kansas Hospital Association. Welcome back.
It's Jaron, by the way. It's a unique name, so it always Jaron Caffrey. We submitted new testimony today that I'll have you reference. Again, yesterday we also provided our annual workforce report that was just released. So if you have questions about that, we'd be happy to answer any of those at the appropriate time. But really, from the Kansas Hospital Association, our perspective, we've really been entrenched on these issues over the last year, over the last 2 years. And many of the folks here in the room, we've really begun working with and encouraging our members to work with as well. Because really, when we look at the issues of workforces, the last couple of days have revealed there is not one thing that will solve these issues. It is definitely a very multifaceted issue, and we really have to look at the big picture of what are the different bridges that we can build to bridge over all of these gaps, because that is what is going to fix some of these challenges. So in our testimony for today, we have a variety of updates of what we are doing, just a few of the items, but then several things that are out there that might be great opportunities as we look at especially the next legislative session. And one piece I will mention, I know this committee is really focused on contract nursing, but really the issues of workforce, it isn't just nursing. Our hospitals, they have a huge need right now for all disciplines in radiology and respiratory therapy and physical and occupational therapies, in addition to nursing. So really, again, talking about this big picture, most of our work really focuses on how do we promote the capacity of our employees and also increase the supply of new healthcare graduates. And with doing that, and really where I think the legislature can really play a role in this, is how do we make a competitive advantage for Kansas? How do we create a draw for more people to want to move to Kansas that already have existing healthcare backgrounds? We can hire them, make them live in the state of Kansas, grow our population, while obviously getting more people interested in healthcare. So highlighting a few components of our testimony, one thing you mentioned, you've heard mentioned the word preceptor a lot. Well, we know that, especially on the hospital side, we want employees to feel equipped to be a preceptor, which really is just to give students good experiences when they come for a clinical or for a new hire, because that helps improve retention. We have an academy that is actually, we've just launched that this past October, and we're holding that regionally to try to train and build that up. So that's a piece on the retention side that we're working on. You've heard apprenticeships mentioned a few times. Last year, the legislature passed House Bill 2292, and that was funding for apprenticeships broadly, but there was some money in there specifically for healthcare. And we have really capitalized on that. We have 10 hospitals that have launched apprenticeships in healthcare. I know there are clinics that have launched this. I know there's long-term care and assisted living facilities that have launched apprenticeships, which really, it's a grow your own opportunity. How do you take that housekeeper if they want to become a CNA or a medical assistant and help them do that? So that's been a great opportunity. We do think there is opportunity, though, for further investments in apprenticeships to remove some other barriers. On the awareness piece, we at KHA have worked with other partners, including the Board of Regents and Department of Education. This is the second year that we've done a virtual healthcare career day. Last year, we had 2,100 students. This year, we had 3,000 students participate from all ages as just a way to grow awareness. Again, we need doctors and nurses, but we also want students to know, and again, the public to know, that there are a ton of opportunities in healthcare that if you might not think nursing's for you, heck, maybe respiratory therapy is for you. And we really provide that day in the life. And we've also launched a new website called happyinhealthcare.org to, again, have a one-stop shop. Where's all the scholarships that if I want to go to a school in Kansas, number one, what are those schools? It has that on there. But also, how do I pay for my education? Because there are a lot of ways that for most programs or many programs, you can go with little to no debt. And so we have all of that information on there, again, to try to remove some of those barriers. But, regarding starting on the second page of our testimony, some of the things that we think the legislature can consider, I won't, again, highlight all of these. I mentioned the piece on apprenticeships. I think last night, the budget conference committees actually might have addressed some of the proviso language that the Senate had regarding agency staffing. And so we would certainly agree that, as we've mentioned on Monday, that would certainly be included this year. We think that helps on the agency staffing piece. You've heard mention about the Kansas Nursing Initiative Grant Program. This is a program that already exists. We've listed there might be a couple opportunities that can be reformed or enhanced to make it better for our colleges. But again, a program that already exists, that is a perfect opportunity for, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. How do we maybe add more funding, allow funding to be used for things like student success services, NCLEX prep, because we, number one, want to make sure that if a student gets into a nursing program, they don't drop out, because that's a seat that could have been filled by a student that would have lasted through the entire program. In our workforce report, you can see it's fluctuated a little bit, but last year, 11% of students in Kansas that were in schools of nursing, they did drop out. So those were 11% of potential nurses we could have produced, or graduated, I should say, but that ended up not happening. So looking at the Kansas Nursing Initiative grant is a great opportunity to really strengthen our programs, our schools of nursing, and make sure that they are well equipped to expand, and to really make sure that if they're licensed to have 50 students, but they might only have 20 right now, maybe that can help bridge that and make sure that they can actually produce 50 graduates every year. On the piece, we do have a call out to nursing instructors. We do want to do more, and think we should do more on how do we recruit and retain those instructors and schools of nursing. When we've talked with colleges, we work a lot with the colleges through the Board of Regents and private universities and colleges. But really, we hear a lot that even if there could be money, maybe another barrier is, well, if you give money just for the healthcare instructors, well, there might be an imbalance. We have to sometimes give a bonus or give that raise to everybody. And so are there ways we can look at, we've listed some ideas, bonuses. Could there be a tax credit or a tax break for healthcare instructors as an incentive? In Kansas, you can be you can teach in a school of nursing, teach in whatever program, and have that benefit. Again, creating a competitive advantage. The Nursing Service Scholarship Program, there are modifications that are working their way this session, and we would certainly recommend that those continue to be made to really help support more students that are in schools of nursing, to remove some of those financial barriers. Coming to the end here on that, almost the last page, we believe in Kansas, create an allied health loan repayment program or a scholarship program, because while we do have nursing covered and physicians we do have covered, there really is not a strong scholarship program for those physical therapists, occupational therapists, all of those other allied health programs that the Promise Act might not cover at the community and technical college level, but really we need this at the four-year university level. That would be a great opportunity for that service scholarship. We do believe also that there's an opportunity to increase funding in graduate medical education. So for the physicians, we need more primary care providers. This session, I think there's $750,000 being put towards that, but other states are investing more. We think that there's an opportunity for Kansas to invest more. And then lastly, really looking at the Rural Opportunity Zone program. Again, it's something that already exists, but how do we help our rural communities maybe have new incentives? Maybe there's a child care or a housing component instead of the existing incentives to really help maximize getting students, people from out of state recruited, not just to Kansas, but also for those rural communities. So again, would be happy to answer questions about any of those. I know there's a smattering of a lot of them, touching on a lot of different elements, but we mentioned on our next steps that Senate proviso language, but again, since that likely sounds like it is included, and we encourage that would be in the final budget, we would be in favor if this group or others in the House would want to have an interim committee or a special committee to look at this or have more conversations. We'd be certainly willing to do that, whether that's formally or informally. So we stand ready to support however we can. I'm in fried information, but happy to accept questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Next up, Kylie Childs with Leading Age. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Kylie Childs with Leading Age Kansas, and you've probably seen Rachel Monger up here the last couple days, but she asked me to step in for today since she was unavailable. And as you've heard, staffing agencies have been a primary concern for our members, but workforce is also on our strategic plan and trying to figure out how we can grow our own. I know you've heard a lot about that today. So there should be a handout in your folders that talks a little bit about the various things that we've been attempting to do. We did start a workforce committee with our own members and start trying to identify what are those barriers that are preventing us from recruiting and retaining our own. And so on the backside of that sheet, you'll see the toolkit that we're trying to develop that would aim to address each of those things when we're talking about education, childcare, housing, apprenticeship models, and the scheduling barriers that can sometimes come. We've been working with Hamilton Riker, which is an intermediary, on apprenticeship programs for CNAs and seeing how we can develop those out. And really our focus when it comes to workforce development is what are the new opportunities, outside the box thinking we can do with career paths when it comes to healthcare workforce. What can we do with career ladders and lattices and allow more transferability between credits and different opportunities for education that may not look as the traditional path currently does. And that would help us with our recruitment efforts when we are partnering with HOSA chapters and different colleges to try and recruit these students into our field. So what we would recommend, as you've heard, it's going to be a multifaceted approach. And we do recommend the proviso language from Senate Bill 514 to address the registration for staffing agencies. We believe that pricing transparency would help providers with being able to compete and see how they can raise their rates to recruit back some staff they may have lost over the COVID years. In the interim session, we would also recommend a healthcare workforce roundtable, so that all of the different entities that you've heard from today could come together and see how our ideas interconnect. How can we create a comprehensive healthcare workforce bill to start trying to address all of these things rather than trying to piece them bit by bit? And then finally, during the 2025 session, bringing it all together with the passage of these as bills, whether that is the contents from Senate Bill 277 or House Bill 2265 to codify the staffing agency registration, and then support the passage of the comprehensive healthcare workforce bill that could come out of that interim committee. So with that, I will leave it there and answer questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. About 2 minutes before the committee started, Representative McDonald brought these in. Amy Garcia, are you wishing to appear before, or are you just wanting to have this as part of the written testimony? Okay. Well, come to the microphone, please.
So you've heard many good ideas today from the folks who've preceded me. I'm Amy Garcia from the Kansas Nursing Workforce Center. We are working right now on a State of Nursing in Kansas report, aggregating data from multiple agencies and associations. We think it will be a good tool for the legislature in the coming year. We also see a need for a strategic plan related to nursing in Kansas. I would close by saying we've compared data about nursing in Kansas to national and the surrounding states. Kansas nurses are paid less, work more hours. As many nurses in Kansas are working as other states. Our nurses are older and more are planning to retire within the next 5 years. Nurses in Kansas had higher workloads and a greater increase during COVID. We think that these reasons are why they've gone to agencies. The desire for having more flexible staffing. We think there are things that can be done, and look forward to addressing that.
Thank you. We will make this a part of our record, and we may be calling on you for some questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Committee, what questions do you have and for whom? No one yet? Representative Ballard.
Trying to remember. Oh, let's see. I think I'll start with Blake Sanders. I think part of the chart that you had up, we talked about college readiness.
Those slides actually somehow didn't get included, so
They didn't. Okay.
We'll get you those.
Okay, but I looked at that, and it was English, math, reading, and I think there was a fourth one. But
yeah, it's the areas of the ACT,
okay.
And English, math, reading, and science.
Science. Okay, that's what I was
Excuse
guessing.
me.
Science. All right. Now, what I have here, okay, if we look at how it has fallen over time, okay, that would be pretty much K through 12 curriculum, maybe high school curriculum in many ways. If we're short on reading and the math, because what we do at the University of Kansas, we do math 101, 102 in order to be remedial so that they're able to go into those areas they want. Are you saying or implying that maybe we need a stronger academic curriculum?
So here's what I'd suggest, based on what we've seen. If we remediate in that manner at the post-secondary level, so those students rarely get to the credit-bearing class and are successful, very rare. So what we're doing now is looking at how do we do co-requisite remediation where those students are enrolled in the credit-bearing class and then get tutoring while they're in that class. Because if you tell a student, well, you need to take these 2-3 credit hour classes before you get a chance to take the credit bearing class, they never complete. And so that's been an issue. Another issue that probably is an advising issue on the high school level is that students won't take math sometimes their senior year. And so if you see a student that doesn't take math their senior year, their chances of being ready go way down. And, it's one thing on math. There's a second thing that if you look at is reading. So we have a blueprint for literacy that's in the legislative process right now. If a student can't read, that's a much longer remediation at the post-secondary level than even math. And if they can't read at grade level, they also have trouble in every subject. They actually have trouble in math because of the, we call them word problems or story problems. You have trouble in science because there's so much reading in all these disciplines.
Thank you for answering that question. And that was not to point a finger at who's not doing what, but it's looking, when you say we can't just, someone said we can't just stay on the fringes, we have to worry about what's really part of that problem. And the other half, because I taught second grade for a long time before I went on and teach college level. Reading is one thing, reading comprehension is another. And a lot of times you can read, but you can't comprehend what you're reading in many ways. And so that's why I was looking when you say, if those scores are going down, there's a reason for them going down, because I don't think our children are any less smart than they were before. They're just not taking those core courses if they don't have to. Okay? I don't want to, I'm not putting you on the spot because I don't want to get all these letters and you get them and I get them talking about what's really happening. I'm just looking at what really is the problem. And if we're going to solve it, we have to look at where it is.
Committee, other questions?
Yeah, I have another person, but I just wondered if anyone else had one for him.
Yes, please proceed.
Then my other person would be Heather Morgan. All right, you were focusing on, I think, outreach for your math one, the Promise Act. Mm-hmm. Right, okay. Now, part of that Promise Act you indicated was only right now for Kansas residents. Am I correct?
Yes.
Correct. But you want to be able to maybe expand it. Would you explain what you mean by expand it?
So if a student lives just across the line in Oklahoma and is going to work at a Kansas healthcare facility, currently they're not eligible for the Promise Scholarship. So if we scholarship that Oklahoma student, as long as they promise to live and work in Kansas for 2 years, sort of a trade-off for getting the scholarship.
So if we were taking from a Kansas student by expanding it, then that student has that obligation. It's almost like our preceptorship program that we have for KU Med. Part of it is if you're getting the scholarship from the state, you commit to 2 years, 4 years in rural Kansas.
That is correct.
Okay, so you're
Similar idea.
All right. Thank you.
Heather, stay put if you would, please. Heather, sorry. I thought I'd catch you while you're still up there. You also were talking about the qualifications for instructors, how that had increased. It used to be like one grade level or one, above what they were teaching. And now you say it's changed. Can you help me understand when did it change and how it changed?
I'm not sure it changed, but it's becoming a bigger barrier because we're not able to hire those master's level folks. And so Carol did mention that there is the exception, so you can get an exception.
Okay.
It's a little bit burdensome to ask for the exception because, quite frankly, we just can't find the master's prepared people. And then the faculty that we are getting, some of them aren't interested in getting their master's degree. I think President Janot mentioned at the CNA level, there's even tighter regulations about who could be the course supervisor there. And that's another issue that we're experiencing. You have to have experience in long-term care. What we hear from our colleges is, especially our border colleges, some other states interpret that rule a little bit differently. And so we could run a lot more CNA classes if we could have a little bit more flexibility on who can be. What does supervision mean and how does that work?
And are those regulations set by the Board of Nursing or are they by statute?
KDADS regulates CNAs, and then the educational regulations for the ADN programs, RN programs would be.
So if there were regulations to be eased, that would have to be at the KDADS level. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
CNA was KDADS, the ADN and LPN is Board of Nursing.
Okay. All right. Committee, other questions? Representative Ballard.
Someone an opportunity. Let's see. We want to go with Carol Moreland. You said two things that really caught my attention. Number one, the 3 S's, the salary, the staffing ratio, and the safety, and the apprenticeship model. Okay, would you expand on the apprenticeship model? Because you said, my question is, can we pay them now or you couldn't do it before? What are you proposing?
Well, the apprenticeship model that we have kind of been working with Jaron at the Hospital Association on is you would take someone who is a nursing student and they would be able to get paid while they're doing their nursing education. It might be that their tuition is paid by this facility that's going to, maybe hire them or something along that line. And then this apprenticeship would really be an agreement between a nursing program and an employer, a facility. So that facility then would provide clinical for this nursing student, and they would have like a preceptor or something there that would work with the student. But when the student's doing part of their clinical, they will be paid for that like they would for an employee. The very important thing is, though, that they stay within their scope of practice. So we've kind of talked to Jaron and others about that. But it is a way for them to make some money while they're going to school. And then hopefully, once they get done, they would be employed there. That facility knows them much better. So they're not hiring someone that they haven't seen very much. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that does. Okay, fine. And then I just have one more, and that will include Jaron. You mentioned something else in terms of scholarships for allied health areas as well. We're talking about contract nursing, and you acknowledge that. But one of the things we looked at is how do you suggest we get the word out about the nursing profession? Because there used to be career colleges and people a career day, you go in and out and people would talk about it. I don't see anything out there that talks about nursing. I know our hospital offers scholarships for students who would like to go to school if they'll come and they'll work, back at our hospital. But if you did a combination of allied health and what all it involves in the nursing, how do you propose we get the word out that this is a career for you?
Right. And I think exactly to that point is some of the work that we are doing and trying to work with other partners on, like the virtual healthcare career day. So in the last couple of years, we again, the whole idea with that is here is what a respiratory therapist actually does or a physical therapist actually does. Because if you tell a student about, hey, you might be a good physical therapist in college or for your future career, that doesn't always connect unless they know what that means, what that actually looks like. And so our partnership with both the Board of Regents and then the Department of Education has been really helpful to continue to grow that event because we want more and more students to see that. Again, we have a new website to have that information. The other thing is, Carol mentioned about maybe there should be some kind of campaign, whether that's state dollars or private dollars as well, or just private dollars, whatever that looks like. I think you are right. There needs to be more awareness of that at an overall level, both for nursing, but also here are all of the opportunities in healthcare. And here is why healthcare is a great career, great profession. And we are doing some of that. We do have some campaigns centered around that, but obviously we don't always have the resources to take that really to a high level to really reach probably the numbers that we'll need to make big differences, if that helps.
Very much, Mr. Chair. I'm done.
Stay right there. Do you know what a candy striper is?
Oh,
Yeah, I've heard the term. Yes.
oh, no.
Okay, so when I was a young man in school, there were the cute girls wearing these striped dresses,
That's right.
and they were volunteers. They would go to the hospital, and that was their introduction into the healthcare field. Is there a program like that now, or do our child labor laws prevent them from doing such a thing?
I am glad you asked that. That is a really good question, though. So I have a colleague in the Kansas City area, and we're really working on some of these things to then really bring some new initiatives to the rest of the state. We are really trying to help promote that you in high school can go to a shadow at a hospital or healthcare organization. You can do an internship. You can volunteer. There are a lot of hospitals that do already have programs that exist. And the really structured, robust, hey, if you're in high school, come. We have a summer academy. We have a XYZ. But really, it's also interesting timing because I know the State Department of Education, they're making it a goal for more students to come out of high school with some kind of a real world learning experience. And some of our work in Kansas City is with the Kauffman Foundation that also shares that goal. And so we're trying to look at how do we make a model of that. So then, especially the rural hospitals that don't have that set up, hey, here you go. Here's kind of an overall package. This is how you can start doing that to make sure that students can come in because they absolutely can, especially if you're 16 and up. If it's below that, there might be a little hit or miss depending on the facility, but you're absolutely right.
All right, thank you for that. Representative Concanon. Whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I was a candy striper. And I did it for the outfit. I'll admit it. Yes, it was. And I've been in a hospital. I believe Salina Regional has a display of all of the outfits through the years of candy stripers. So, yeah, kind of forgot about that. I actually have a question for Blake. Back to these charts. So I'm trying to understand what it is I'm looking at. So this is the NCLEX first time they took it passage rate.
I believe that's correct.
Okay. And I mean, basically the purpose of looking at this is to see how those colleges, those schools are preparing them for that first time. Do we know, and Carol may know this, how many times they're taking it, if they're sticking with it, or if a drop rate, anything like that? I mean, I think that the chart with the numbers that are entering the workforce helps, but.
So I'm sure Carol would know how many, I mean, she's got all those data on how many people took it twice and then passed
Okay.
And I think eventually many do. It's, I'm never concerned. The average is one thing. Our average is pretty good. What I'm concerned about is the lower tier of programs that need support. And so if you look at those programs, generally, they're under-resourced programs.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Committee, any other questions?
Yeah, I do.
Yes, Representative Cannon.
For Kyle. So Kyle, you have a lot in your testimony and you went fast. So I'm trying to keep up. First of all, a few years ago, I carried the bill on psychiatry. Can you tell me what this first bullet, how this is different than what we did then?
Graduate medical education piece. Yeah, at that time, psychiatry wasn't allowed to take part in the graduate medical student loan repayment program. So what we're trying to do with the first part in adding psychiatric residencies to University of Kansas Medical Center in Wichita is exactly that. We're actually trying to add the residencies and fund those, whereas what you championed was related to the medical student loan repayment.
Okay. And so I went through here and 3 million there, 1.1 million on the next one. And I was trying to keep up. Are those ongoing? I mean, I know they say annual, but what I want to know is if they're SGF ongoing.
Part of it is, not all of it. And then there will be some of them, like, for example, child and adolescent psychiatry, those will be adding 3 per year for 4 years. Addiction psychiatry is a 1-year fellowship, so it's going to be that same amount. So some of that will grow. And 5.4 million was included on the Senate appropriations bill, and then I believe they've put that off to omnibus. So the second piece, or the second phase, is relating to the nursing part, which that would be an ongoing cost until the legislature sees that, hey, this got fixed, or it becomes a different issue.
Okay. I haven't gotten as far as reading phase 2 yet. It's kind of hard to read and listen at the same time, but maybe you and I can visit about all of this at some point.
Absolutely happy to.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
Where are we on phase 2? Is that?
Phase 2 is what we were just talking about with,
considered?
this is the 2.4 million that we're asking this.
Is being considered?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Committee, other questions? Well, seeing none, I want to thank everyone for being here and appearing, especially those of you who are here 3 days in a row. So committee, just look through your notes tonight and let's put a report together tomorrow. Thank you all.